your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thanks for joining us. The CP Holiday Train campaign was a big success this season with over $1.3 million and 121,000 pounds of food collected for the 24th annual event. People came together to brave the elements in areas like Medicine Hat, Brooks and Calgary to watch the brightly lit train make its way through and enjoy some concerts while raising money and food donations for local food banks. The CP Holiday Train has now raised more than $22.4 million and collected over 5.15 million pounds of food since 1999. Wow. Operation Red Nose provided more than 26,000 rides home across Canada, including 606 here in Alberta over the holiday season. The initiative offers safe rides home for those who went out for a night on the town during the Christmas season. According to coordinator Kathy Hung, the campaign was a huge success.
We were able to provide 517 rides this holiday season. For us, that was 8 nights throughout the course of December. We drove just over 10,000 kilometers. We raised just under $15,000 in donations from the rides alone that will be donated to the U of L Pronghorn Athletics programs. There was some additional sponsorship dollars that does bring the overall financials higher. We just don't have that final count yet.
The Operation Red Nose campaign has been running in Lethbridge for 26 years and plans are still in place to bring it back again next holiday season. Some final numbers are in from the Christmas Hope campaign. The Interfaith Food Bank Society of Lethbridge says collectively the initiative was to serve over 5,000 kids and 3,000 adults during the Christmas holiday season. Instead, they ended up serving 6,300 children and over 3,200 adults, about 1,500 more than expected.
So that just speaks to the volume of need in the community. We do expect that to continue, but again, are so grateful that the community helped us to get it all taken care of. It was a crazy year. We were definitely expecting an increase in the number of people that we were serving, just not quite as many as we did see come through. So it was a very busy year. We did have some shortages and some emergency calls out to the community, but ultimately everyone who asked for help was able to get it this Christmas.
McIntyre says they had a 40% increase in the numbers of hampers that went out to households over the holidays. There was also a 47% increase in the number of people who received those hampers. The Shoes for Kids campaign was started as a way to provide new pairs of shoes for children in our community whose families are struggling. The initiative has since expanded to include all-year access for students who are in need of some much-needed footwear.
Our growth has doubled from last year and our need is growing.
The group is asking for brand new shoes for kids in kindergarten to grade 12, as well as cash donations that will be used to purchase footwear for children in Lethbridge and southern Alberta.
Our first year started with Lethbridge Public School District and then moved also with Holy Spirit. And then this year we have also expanded out to Palliser School Division. We have also served children in Begunny as well as Standoff as well. We've gone all the way out as far as Pincher Creek, and we just know that the way that our team has been able to connect with all of Southwest Alberta, whether that's law enforcement and or other school districts, is we are very optimistic that we are going to even hit more districts moving forward as well, which means we're going to have more kids in need.
The group explained the ever-expanding growth of the campaign and compared the number of shoes given out in 2022 to what they are hoping to distribute out in 2023.
We have given out over 330 pairs of shoes within the Lethbridge area. On both reserves, it's well over 400 pairs of shoes. So we're sitting at about 750 pairs of shoes within the Southwest region. We're looking to doubling those numbers within 2023.
The nonprofit is run by 5 volunteers, and they're hoping to fill even more of these positions quite soon.
We're going to need a team of at least 10.
Officials from the Lethbridge Hurricanes say it's vital to partner with local organizations like Shoes for Kids to make sure as many sneakers as possible can be given out with care.
It's very important to us, just kind of bringing to light and highlighting something that maybe a lot of us might possibly be taking for granted that others might not be so fortunate to have.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
When we come back, we bring you our look ahead to 2023 panel discussion with history book publisher Vince Byfield, former MLA Gordon Kessler, and podcaster Val Olson. Stay tuned. You won't want to miss the rest of this half hour.
You know, if an average criminal steals from you, they go to jail. But when the federal government steals from everybody, they get reelected.
We want to look ahead to this new year and also look back into Alberta's history to see what lessons we can learn from the politicians of the past. For this, we've chosen a panel including Vince Byfield, historian and commentator, social media mom and podcaster Val Olson, and former Alberta MLA Gordon Kessler. They all join me now. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to start with Mr. Kessler. You have a fascinating history in Alberta's past. So can you give us an idea of what the Western Canadian what the Western Canada Concepts Party was all about?
Basically, it was about achieving equity within the system and giving Alberta and the rest of the Western provinces an opportunity to have input in the decision-making process. And we felt the best way was to use the Quebec model of separation. And we really felt that with the threat of separation, there might be some major changes. There was at the time the Tripoli Senate was going around, which was one of the things that would have worked to include Alberta and the other provinces in the decision-making process of central Canada. However, it didn't materialize, and eventually it went by the way of the dodo bird.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so was it actually a separatist party?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was full-fledged separation. If we couldn't accomplish the things that we wanted to accomplish by offering olive branches to central Canada, we were definitely prepared to separate from the rest of Canada. Absolutely.
Wow. Okay, so Gordon, what was the political climate of Alberta back then?
Well, it was a time of political upheaval in a lot of ways. There was a fellow by the name of Tom Sidlinger had a party started, Independence Party and Alberta Independence Party, and then of course the Reform Party was in the wings there. There was just a lot of chaos as far as Alberta politics. And after the NEP, especially after the National Energy Policy, there were a lot of disgruntled Albertans, and they just felt like we had been betrayed, and that Alberta needed to find its own way and forge its own destiny.
Wow. Okay. Vince Byfield, let's turn this over to you. You are well versed in the history of Alberta politics as well. So what do you think led up to Albertans feeling that they needed Western Canadian concepts?
It goes pretty much back to the birth of the province. A fellow by the name of Bramley Moore in 1911 published a book called The Case for Home Rule. And he was an MLA out of Edmonton, and he already sensed that this was a raw deal for the province of Alberta. And unfortunately, he perished in the front lines of World War I. But he is on record as being the first separatist, although he was a liberal at that time. But it has steadily grown, right, through the whole period of the 1930s during the Depression and the Crow rate. Every single time that Ottawa tried to basically overreach its powers and essentially steal from the province of Alberta wholesale. You know, if an average criminal steals from you, they go to jail. But when the federal government steals from everybody, they get reelected. That's what Dad always said. It's just one of those things. But it grew and grew, and it reached the point where when Gordon got elected, that it was now I think at some points in the province, it was up to 20%. It was in terms of 1 in 5 were ready to separate. And now with the, you name it, the No More Pipelines bill, the carbon tax, just so many things going on, the equalization scheme. I think it's normally now about 33%. I've seen it as high as mid 40s in terms of people who are open to some kind of sovereignty now. So I would say every time there's a major tax grab, we see a doubling of separatist sentiment in this province. And now we're at a key threshold. 33% means a doubling of that would be 66. That's a large majority.
Thank you for that, Vince. We do need to take a quick break, though. So when we come back, we have a question for Gordon Kessler about the threat of communism in the legislature during his time as an MLA. Keep it right here. Welcome back to our panel discussion on what Alberta will look like in 2023. Gordon Kessler, we didn't get to you before the break, but thinking back to your time as an MLA with Western Canadian Concepts, was there a growing battle with unions, communism versus free market ideas?
There wasn't so much a growing battle with the unions as there was with Central Canada. You know, I had to deal with the unions when I would speak at meetings and so forth, but my always answer was why do we need unions when the federal government has got a regulation in place for everything that you offer? There's already a regulation that protects the worker. To me, unions had become redundant, and I still think they are. I think that they're a pawn of the government, and basically they're an extension of the leftist governments when they're in power.
Okay. Now, Val Olson, it's thanks to you that we have Gordon Kessler with us today. So when you hear what Gordon has to say, and you did have Gordon on your podcast, so you've spoken him more at length about, all of this. Do you feel that there is a similarity today to what Gordon's talking about and what we're seeing now?
Absolutely. When I started looking at some of the policies of the day that Gordon was advocating for, it resonated with me today and many Albertans because, as they mentioned earlier, with the gun grab, with increased taxes, families are finding it harder and harder to survive when it comes to education, when it comes to quality of food or medical care. All of it is under attack. And so I really drilled down and I put him in the hot seat on my podcast, and I went right into the meat and potatoes and was most concerned about what he was sharing regarding communist influence inside the Alberta government back in the 80s.
Vince, you have a good grasp of what we are seeing in Alberta. So Mr. Kessler has talked about the communist influence and past hopes for Alberta. So based on what we have just heard from Gordon and Val, is this maybe something to look forward to in 2023, or is it mostly just political rhetoric?
No, I think there's a lot to it. I got a text from Danielle a couple months back, and she was remembering my brother Link fondly in the text. And she said that one of the things she really valued from him was he was very good at sussing out places where the federal government was deliberately going behind the backs of the provincial government and setting up programs with mid-level bureaucrats in the provincial government without any knowledge or notification to the province. And that was her concern. And here in Edmonton, when the NDP back in 2012, the total NDP vote in Edmonton was 65,000. Now it's 200,000. And during that time when they took power, they hired a lot of provincial employees, bureaucrats. As well, we've seen a huge growth in municipal bureaucrats and federal. So that has contributed to the point now where here in Edmonton, 19 of the 20 constituencies of Edmonton are NDP. So it's very insidious what's going on. And I think that when my father passed away, that was the thing that he couldn't sleep over. He had a really strong fear that the NDP were going to take control again, and this time it would probably break the spirit of Alberta.
When I was in the legislature, my biggest concern is that the parties that we deemed conservative had gone off the rails. Peter Lougheed was the king in Alberta politics forever. But Peter Lougheed was never a conservative. He was never a conservative. Peter Lougheed implemented more. I mean, Grant Notley, he just nibbled on the outer edges because he was gleeful about what Peter Lougheed was doing. He instituted government involvement in the oil and gas industry, started a provincial airline, was involved in the mining industry, was involved in the petrochemical industry, was involved in the lumber industry. Everywhere you looked, the government had their fingerprints on business. They were involved in business.
Yeah.
And so that opened a lot of doors for the leftists to move in, and 100%. They did.
Yeah.
Thank you for that insight, Gordon. We do need to take a quick break, but you won't want to miss what's coming up next. So keep it right here. Welcome back to our panel discussion on what Alberta will look like in 2023. Before the break, Gordon Kessler, you said that there was something you wanted to add to finish to your thought about the threat to Alberta's freedom and the left ideology gaining positions of power in Alberta.
It was one of my biggest concerns when I was there, that we weren't just fighting the federal system in Ottawa, but within our own province, we were being taken over by those wolves in sheep's clothing, and that's exactly what was happening.
Now, when we look,
that's my concern with the current government, by the way.
Yeah. So with that said, when we look ahead to 2023, Val, what do you think that Albertans need to be doing? I mean, you are an Albertan. You currently live in Arizona, though, but you follow Alberta politics still very, very closely, and you're very passionate about it.
First of all, we need to start educating citizens. And citizens are saying themselves, look, we know it's bad. We know there are wolves in sheep's clothing. So let's get all the facts on the table. And so accountability is a big part of it. We have to start asking tough questions to politicians and listen to their responses or their non-responses. And then from there, we know a starting point of what they stand for.
Now, I believe that Vince, your father, Ted Byfield, and Gordon may have crossed paths at some point there.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe give us some insights into how Alberta changed in politics or ideology during the times of the Alberta Report and your father's publishing.
Oh, when I ask people nowadays who was the best premier of Alberta, I usually get either Ralph Klein or Peter Lougheed. The problem is that those two individuals, these are conservatives who are telling me this, and Gordon's 100% right. They're not really conservative. The person who amazes me are the two that precede the conservatives, William Aberhart and Ernest Manning. Those two gentlemen ran this province for a third of a century, especially Ernest Manning, 25 years, 7 elections, re-elected 7 times, didn't declare a deficit at all in all those 25 years. And then they built the oil sands industry, which is an amazing story in and of itself. And these guys, especially Manning, the thing I want to point out here is that these guys were very Christian. And this is something that people don't like to talk about now, this idea of separation of church and politics. I think we've got it all backwards, right? So there is this attitude that Christians should not get involved in politics. Well, Ernest Manning was a very Christian. Literally every single Sunday, he was on the radio nationally on a program called Back to the Bible while premier. Now we have a case where when my brother ran in 2012, that was the year of Huntsberger and the Lake of Fire. And I was told by a gentleman for the Progressive Conservatives they were never going to have that problem because they never are going to allow a pastor to run for office ever again. And so here we are. We've gone from having essentially pastors as premiers to now any kind of Christian leader is not allowed to run. They do still run, but they hide their Christian involvement because it's considered unelectable. But that gentleman, Manning, delivered, I think, the best governance our province has ever had by a country mile. Deficit-free for a quarter century, and at the same time bringing in the oil sands industry that has literally brought in trillions of dollars. So that was the first point I wanted to make. Second point, sorry to be quick here, is what we're trying to do here in Edmonton. So I have now signed up over 250 volunteers from Edmonton and around Edmonton to get the vote out. So we think that we can turn things around, that we can turn the tide. With God's help, we can turn the tide because federally, Edmontonians still predominantly vote Conservative, but for some reason, they're not voting Conservative provincially. And I think a large part of that is they don't realize their own power. They just don't even bother going to vote. Here in my area of Lessard, the poll was 40% turnout, which is pathetic. And a lot of them are Conservative. So I think they just felt, why bother going? We're just going to lose. But we have to change that, and I think we are changing that. So I think you're going to see a lot of Conservative seats in the next election, which is coming up in May, but it's vital. I hope if anybody sees anything, every single vote matters.
Yeah, Vince, you are so right. Every vote does matter, and of course, voter turnout rates do determine those election outcomes. We do need to pause here and take a quick break, but when we come back, what's the future for Alberta in Confederation? That's next. Keep it right here. Welcome back to our panel discussion on the future of Alberta in 2023. There's always been a bond between Americans and Canadians. So Val Olsen, I'm going to have you weigh in on this one. You're from Medicine Hat, but where you live currently in Arizona, you're surrounded by Canadian expats and freedom-loving Americans. So can you tell us what you're hearing from the Canadians who are down there and the level of support from the Americans that you meet?
It's the quality of life. It's the quality of life that is the draw to the United States compared to what they're experiencing in Alberta. People are looking for solutions, and that's naturally taking them outside of, what they've lived their whole life. They're looking for greener pastures, so to speak. So we talk a lot about Alberta 51, about the upcoming referendum and the importance and significance and value of Alberta having a referendum. So that is what my discussions are about. And for viewers at home saying, well, I don't know about a referendum if that's ever going to happen. I promise it's going to happen. I promise it's coming, because a referendum allows you to make a decision for yourself, not just hand it over to a politician. So our question is, do you want to leave Canada? Yes or no? Who is best equipped to answer that question? And I believe it's you.
Okay, well,
Jennifer,
yeah, go ahead.
She's brought up the 51st state. Can I just, I was a separatist.
Yeah.
And I knew that Alberta needed to make a serious move. And she's brought up the 51st state, and I'm on board, because I think that separation is, it's gone under the bridge. We've lost that opportunity. But what Albertans and all Western Canadians need to know is that the system is stacked against them. When you read the BNA Act, it was always intended that the West and the Eastern provinces would be hewers of wood and drawers of water, and that they would be slaves to a central government. They would mine and produce raw materials. Those raw materials would be sent to the Ontario and Quebec. And once they were manufactured into goods and services, they would be sent back to the colonies, as it were, Alberta and the other Western provinces. And I think until, and it's not going to happen, they will never relinquish the power that they've garnered over these years.
Yeah, I was going to say, how
I think
easy would it actually be to separate?
Oh,
You
I
know?
can say a few things on that.
Go ahead.
A couple of things. First of all, there's a little bit of history that about the American Revolution that most Canadians don't know, and that is that first of all, Nova Scotia was one of the colonies that was part of the Revolution, but it didn't. It got squashed pretty quick because the largest naval base for the Brits was there, and the largest army regiments were there, and so they didn't really stand much of a chance. But afterwards, as a gesture to Nova Scotia, the 13 colonies created an offer to the rest of the other British colonies that if they chose to, even after the 13 colonies had declared their independence, wanted to join, they would be treated as equal in every way as the other 13 states. And that was then set as the precedent for all of the states and territories going forward for the rest of the United States. But it was because of Nova Scotia, and they were very surprised that when Quebec didn't join, but of course Quebec, as is the case, was bribed with land. That was, the British said, if you stay with us, you're going to get all the land that is currently to the west of the 13 colonies. So they said, as usual, the Quebecers said, okay, and they took the bribe and they didn't join up. But which surprised the Americans. But anyway, that principle was the beginning of Manifest Destiny, and it created the great Americans. And it was because of the fight in Nova Scotia, and it was an homage to them. And so it still stands now. If Alberta made the call to become a 51st state, they would be treated equally, just like Texas or California in every way. And that was because of that extension early on. That's another little bit of history that's not very well known.
Thank you to all the members of our panel for sharing your insights. Val Olson, Vince Byfield, and Gordon Kessler. I appreciate you all joining me today. Well, we sure hope you enjoyed that panel discussion. We do need to take a quick break, but when we come back, do farmers feel like they're being singled out? Up next, a discussion about what 2023 looks like in Alberta farming. Keep it right here.